Hey, Instagram fam. What's up? Jackie, she, her, what up? It's International Pronouns Day, and today I'm so excited to be going live. That was kind of loud. Coming in hot. Okay, that's it. I'm so excited to be back on here doing a live. I had some different changes recently with business, so I'm super fucking stoked that I'm going to be doing a live with New Leaf with me, one of my awesome folks in private practice and colleague. Amazing. So I am going to invite her on, and it may take a minute or two for her to join. Yay, technology. So let's see if we can get on here. Oh, hey, are you there?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Happy Hump Day.
Woo woo. I
What
have
up?
never done an Instagram live, so I'm just like, oh, this is interesting.
I'm honored to break your Instagram live virginity.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for letting me being the one to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is kind of goofy getting on it like right away. It's like, how does this operator go or what the heck is this? So yeah, so we're going live. I want you to introduce you, your name, your IG handle, your pronouns if you want to be able to do that because it is International Pronouns Day, so it's just even more awesome. And what is your like hump day self-care kind of like treat today too? So
Fun.
I'll shut up while you do that.
Yeah, so I am Mari. I am a pre-licensed therapist. My Instagram is New Leaf with me, so be sure to give a follow. um, yeah, so I have been a therapist for the past almost 2 years now, since my master's and graduating and all that. But I work particularly with millennials, anxious millennials. So really love to specialize with like anxiety, relationships, trauma work, and identity is a big thing. Being that I am an Asian American woman, I really have this big social justice aspect within me, and a lot of the clients that I tend to work with do tend to be within the BIPOC community, so that's just really great for me. Um, yeah, so I think a hump day treat for myself. It's actually going to be later tonight. I am meeting with a few friends to do a bachelorette viewing party. Having a
Ooh.
few drinks later. I know it aired yesterday, but on Hulu, we want to make sure we're not getting any commercials. So we're waiting. Yeah,
Oh my gosh, I love that. And yeah, Michelle's from Minnesota too. So I watched yesterday. You're gonna have to let me know what you think of it, who you like and who you don't like, because I'm a diehard like Bachelorette fan, even if there's just like dumb stuff that they add into the show. Awesome. And that's like so fun too, just like a fun social gathering, self-care that as therapists, we take care of everyone else and we need to pour back into ourselves. And sometimes it's like getting away from the office and being with the people in our lives that we need to see and just enjoy what we want to do together and just kind of have some fun. So
right.
unplug, absolutely. I love that. Any other hump day treats or anything like that?
Um, Well, I am always a huge fan of snacks. So earlier I just ate I'm in between clients today, and so earlier I was just like shoving my face with cheese puffs, and so definitely one of my guilty pleasures is some cheese puffs. I would have liked to enjoy it a little bit more, but sometimes therapist life, you got to do that. So how about you
Gotta
though?
take care. Gotta eat some good snacks. Totally. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with cheese puffs. Like, well, we got to feel guilty about that kind of stuff. That's what I think a little bit. Like, if that's something that we enjoy and we love and we like and it gives us pleasure, why do we have to feel guilty about it? Okay, that's like my, okay, little side tangent. But yeah, that's something that I was thinking about was those two words recently because I just am hearing lots of folks talk about it more and more and more. And that's a whole nother live. But for me, yeah, I have honestly just been so like just snacking in between clients today because it's just like I haven't had my meals prepped and everything like that. So I'm like, what are my really good staples? And for me, like I really am just like a gummy like person. I really like fruit snacks. And so like I have like bags of them. Like I got a big box from Target and I was like, I need to like eat some of these to give me the sugar rush throughout the day. So I really had a bunch of those. And then later, I'm honestly, my self-care tonight for my hump day treat is gonna be like just turning my phone on like no notifications and just unplug and rewind and like unwind because I've been going since 6:30 this morning. So I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to be done with phone or like screens and stuff and just unplug. So yeah. I so yay hump day treats, yay self-care. Um, so I know when we talked about this live, we wanted to talk a little bit about like sexual pleasure and talking about some different types of things. And you and I, we were mulling over a couple different questions, and one of them was like, what are the barriers to sexual pleasure? And so I definitely want us to jump right in and discuss that right away because I think that's huge. And I want to know like what your thoughts are on it or where your mind goes on it right away.
Yeah, and for me, like I think the biggest things that stand out for me are societal kind of constructs and like patriarchy as far as like for women and where women kind of fit in what we're taught to fit in sexual relationships. So like
Mhm.
societally, like in we as women, oh yeah, my pronouns by the way are she her. So but
Mhm.
being a woman though, I think there's a lot of pressure of like, oh, you need to please your partner. You need to please, in being in a heterosexual relationship, it's you need to please the man in the relationship. And I like throughout most of my life, I was never taught or had the conversations of like, you are as a woman are allowed to enjoy this. You're allowed to find pleasure in this, and it's not exactly what you see in like porn. So
Yeah.
yeah, I what I know, like for you, Jackie, like this is your work as a sex
Mhm.
therapist. I feel like this must be things that come up all the time for you.
Oh yeah, all day, every day. And and I totally have to just agree with a lot with what you're saying too. Like when we have like cis het relationships where it is a lot of patriarchal like norms and things that come up. It's kind of like, well, WTF? Why can't women get off too? And why is it that porn also shows like women are getting off in like 30 seconds or something like that? Yeah, the fuck right. Yeah, the fuck ever. And there's Jessica Drake. She is a great. She's someone who is a porn star and she has done lots of movies. She has an Instagram page and she's talked about all the myths of porn too and how you would actually really love her work because she wants to be able to do a lot of sex education with college students and speak across
Mhm.
college campuses. And she's going to have a book come out soon. So that'll be really exciting whenever it does drop. But she was talking about there's so many myths of porn too. Like the sex toys aren't even on because of the speakers and like the volume. It just like trips it up so you can't even hear anything that's happening. So then if you don't hear someone moan and like have that pleasure, then
Mhm.
it's also like that is a conundrum within itself too. And then it's like thinking like, oh, I have to be super loud or animated or moan or like do something with my body that maybe doesn't necessarily fit like my what I'm experiencing or like my sexual pleasure overall. And I just have to say like I totally agree with those things that you're saying. There's a lot of different societal constructs that are really fucked up and it sucks. I also see that I mean like with a lot of my folks like some barriers with sexual pleasure is yeah like not having the education growing up, and really parents, you know, and this may tie into culture too, of like depending on a person's cultural background, like do we even talk about general emotions? Because if we don't even talk about general emotions, we're probably not going to talk about sex. And so it's like swept under the rug. It's, you know, a big topic of conversation that a lot of folks don't necessarily have with their parents, at least from my experience and the clients that I'm working with and whom I see. And they don't necessarily get that in the school setting as much. And if they do, it's the abstinence only model, which doesn't work. And so when we pay the $4 billion a year to have that model only, and people are still having sex, it's like, well, then let's fucking fix it because it's broken. And it's not a bad thing that people are having sex. Why not educate them? And why not talk through like proper like lubrication, you know, condoms, birth control types, all these different kinds of things, because I think that's more important. Like education is key versus just saying like, okay, abstinent only, and we're not going to talk about this at all, and you're never going to get the education that you might need. And so sometimes what I see in my practice is with those folks, when their parents haven't been talking to them about puberty or sex or any of these different types of things, we have to kind of go back and re-educate to like,
Mhm.
okay, well, let's read children's books on this a little bit. This may sound weird. You might be like, Jackie, what the fuck, why? And we're going to do it because you didn't have that education growing up. And then same with teens too. Hey, Dr. Nikki knows. Dr. Nikki is also a sex therapist, and I had the pleasure of being able to listen last year or 2 years ago at World Sexual Health Day, and just amazing, amazing, amazing work. You gotta connect. You would love to connect with her. Um, but essentially, yeah, like I think there's so much that ties into the barriers of like having pleasurable sex. I think it's
Mhm.
education, and then I also think it's like you're saying, societal constructs. I think there's a lot of patriarchy. I think there's tons of things when it comes to just not even knowing our bodies, not even having permission to touch our bodies and explore our bodies and be able to do this, right? And
Yeah.
when we're little kiddos or babies, like that novelty is there. Like we can explore, we can do these things. And it's kind of like if a 2-year-old toddler is touching their penis or vulva or whatever, like we may laugh it off or like that's acceptable because they don't know why. But then it's also like, well, why can't we have those conversations of like, hey, you're gonna want to self pleasure, you're gonna want to masturbate, you may want to watch porn, and I just want to share with you, please do that in your own room. Or like, let's have some boundaries with it. That's totally okay. That's totally healthy. That's totally normal. And let's have a conversation about it. So I think there's more than one barrier with it. I think some other things too, like with folks that I meet with, I mean, there's also mental health symptoms that tie in, right? Like some folks may feel so anxious of like, I don't even know how to fucking talk about sex, and like that's getting in the way of my sex life right now with my partner or partners, and I don't know what I like, and if I don't know what I like, how am I supposed to communicate this? And then that anxiety like spirals, and then they're not in their bodies when they're wanting to have sex with their partners, or even when they're masturbating, they're in their heads. And so when that happens, it's like, well, how do we chill the fuck out, slow the fuck down, do some relaxation stuff, and also explore like some mindfulness based techniques? That's at least what I see and what I do. But then there can also be some different types of things with depression as well, right? Like that can change libido, that can change, you know, overall mood or just general arousal or whatever that might be. And so I think it's interesting, like with mental health, sexual health ties in and physical health ties in, and we're getting there with like mental health and physical health, like this component of them connecting together. However, there's an additional layer that we still need to talk about this more and more. And it's great that we have social media now for some of these benefits, because there are really great sex educators or sex therapists like Dr. Nikki and other people on here who are doing the work to help other folks just know that it's okay for you to seek pleasure, and you don't have to feel like you can't, you know what I mean? So it's so much. I obviously can go off on a tangent all day, every day with this. Um, but I mean, I guess, do you think there's other ones that we haven't talked about with barriers? Because there was a lot of different ones.
Well, I mean, going off what you said about education, like I had to laugh a little bit because I know when I was younger, like little self-disclosure here, like I legitimately thought that if I masturbated, like my vulva was gonna fall off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like,
Hmm.
it's like that kind of shit that gets taught to us, like, and and there's so much shame around sex and talking about it, being open about it, um, and being real about it. Like, how many times do, you know, our kids joking about sex, and that's the only kind of conversation they're really having about it, or even adults for that matter. A lot of the teens that I do work with, like, it's to me it's surprising because but also not surprising at the same time, as far as like, oh yeah, like, you're a teen, you're having sex, that's normal, and yet you don't know hardly anything about STIs, safe sex, what any of that means. Um, and even more surprising when I work with adults who are in that same boat. And it's like, how have you gone your whole life without knowing any of this, or like some of the dangers that could come out of practicing unsafe sex? Um, and even things like, consensual sex. How hard is it to ask somebody, like, is this okay? Can I do this? Are you okay if this happens? But, and that goes back to like socialized and patriarchy type concepts. It's just, you know, sometimes men or can get into these situations where they aren't like trained to know that that's okay. I say trained, but
Hmm.
educated to know like how to ask these things, or how to ask for consent, or how to ask their partner, does this feel good, and am I helping you reach orgasm here, or what would you like to see or feel from me? So I just think it's like such a taboo topic, and it's like this idea of, sex is necessary. Sex is something that we need to have to procreate. I guess not anymore with science and all that stuff, but, getting down to the roots of it, that's what sex is, started for. And so outside of that, though, it's something that we don't talk about. It's necessary, but we don't talk about it.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
and so, it's an interesting thing. And, me not being a sex therapist, it still comes up,
Hmm.
and especially within relationship work that I do, it's, whenever I ask the sex question, are you having sex? How many partners are you having? Are you having safe sex? Are you enjoying your sex? What is your sex life like? People get really uncomfortable. Um, and it's something that is so natural. It is something that, it doesn't have to be, it one thing that I always talk about in relationships is, everybody has their emotional needs, everybody has their, physical needs, their, every part of the relationship that you need. There's also the sexual needs within a relationship, um, and so, I think it's really common where people are like, oh, men are supposed to be the ones who are, men are typically the ones who are always wanting to have sex in these relationships. But that's so not true. And there's so many different factors. I know you brought up depression, impacting libido and all of that stuff. But I feel like sex, there's complexities to it, but also it's just pretty damn simple too.
Right? Like, why do we have to make this such a fucking big deal when it doesn't need to be such a big deal? Like, it's just wild how it is that way. And even when you're talking about, like, yeah, I had to laugh because growing up, I thought this would happen, right? Like, it's those myths that perpetuate, like, these sex negative thoughts in our society, too. Like, the myth of, like, oh, if you masturbate, you're going to lose your genitals, or if a penis even touches you, you're going to get pregnant, or whatever the like myth is, right? And then it's also like the myth of too, like, sex is only for procreation. Well, hold on here. No, it's it's not. Sex can be for pleasure. Sex can be solo. Sex can be for love too. It can be to make a baby, and it can also be like not to make a baby. Like there's so many other reasons as well. And so it's like when we don't talk about that, or when we only talk about like one reason, that's essentially kind of pretty fucked up. And we gotta talk about all these other beautiful things with sex, because you're right, it's natural. It's something that a lot of people love. Maybe if a person, is asexual, then no, then it's probably not their jam. And that's nothing like bad with that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just who they are. That's their sexuality. And that also needs to be honored too. And so sometimes in relationship dynamics as well, it's like when I've worked with couples, like maybe one's ace and maybe one isn't. So it's also how do we work with that a little bit? And then it's also like if someone is ace, then if they're coming to see me for like desire discrepancies, or like, even our DSM is pretty fucking sexist and genderist when you look in there, right? It's kind of fucked up. And in that, it's kind of like, okay, well, if there's desire disorder. Well, no, is that desire? Is that asexuality? Is that stress? Is that burnout? Is that I'm a single parent? Is that I just don't want to ever? Is that like trauma? Like there's so many other things that can go underneath that I don't think is necessarily talked about as much. And so there's a lot of components when it comes to the barriers of sex. And you're right, it doesn't have to be such a big deal. Like it can be so simple. And you and I, when we were talking a little bit about like, what do we see with clients a little bit, or like with the age group 25 to 35, like I see a wide range of all those things that we've been kind of talking about. And it can change too. And sometimes with relationships and relationship wants and relationship needs, like maybe someone's sexual libido, maybe one partner's is higher than the other, and maybe they're in a poly relationship or dynamic, and they need that because they want to be able to have more sex, or they want to be able to have multiple partners, or maybe they want to be able to have an emotional connection with a partner that they just date, nothing sexual. Maybe their primary partner is their sexual partner, and then maybe they also have someone who really knows how to be a dom in the bedroom, and that's just what they fucking love, and that's that person, and then that's where they get that need met. So I think it's just such a wide range of different things. Like with what I see, like that's like a million and one things, it feels like, that I'm just kind of throwing out there. um is there anything that you commonly see like with like 25-35 year olds, or things that you've been thinking about with like, why is this so damn difficult, or what are these things that are coming up like in this age range here that I'm noticing?
Um, and I think a lot of the clients that I tend to see end up being women, cis women. And so I think what tends to come up in many of those stories is, I these kind of narratives of like, I want to be having more sex. I want to be exploring, who I am within these different relationships. And I get it. I do get a lot of clients who are figuring out their sexuality as well. And so, I mean, and that's something that, I think is just, it's such a fluid thing. And so, I can go on and on about that stuff, but I think as far as like my clients though, a lot of it are women who are wanting to have more sex and communicate better, and it's these
Mm-hmm.
things of like, these worries. What if my partner gets upset with me? They've gotten upset with me before. How do I communicate
Mm-hmm.
that? And you had mentioned like the moaning and stuff like that. So many conversations that I've had of women talking about like, oh my gosh, I moaned and like trying to just get this over with, and now my partner keeps doing this and I don't like it. So I mean, it's all of these miscommunications and all of these like expectations or unsaid things that it's like, let's practice getting your needs met. Let's practice like you advocating for that, and and allowing your partner to have whatever response they had, and then we work through it from there. So I think, as far as like the women that I tend to work with, it's a lot of that, a lot of the communication piece, which,
Mm-hmm.
I think is just so important, whether it's, a long term romantic relationship or even just like a one night stand. I
Mm-hmm.
think being able to find satisfaction in that and talk through that is so important. So, yeah.
Totally.
And I think another thing too is a lot of, I am in the AAPI community, and so some of my clients come from that community as well. And so one thing that tends to be um, kind of tends to be a trend in that is people are not always very like physical people or at least like their love languages can sometimes tend to be less of the physical aspect of that. And so um, a lot of times growing up in Asian American families is that looks like there's not a lot of physical touch, there's not a lot of displays of affection. That stuff is just not seen or talked about. A lot of my clients within that community too grew up in families where it's like I didn't know if I was loved or not. And so and that ties into attachment, that ties into so many different things, and impacts their relationships now as adults. So
Totally. Yeah. And especially like attachments as adults and like having this, you're talking about like identity too of like, okay, well, does this person love me? Like that ties into it as well because then you're going to have relationships with everyone. And I could totally see how that again can go back to potentially into like some anxiety too. Is this person judging me? Do they love me? Do they like me? And then just like all these different types of relationships of like, well, I'm not sure how to interpret some of these things with like emotions or social cues or like what is this person thinking and like really questioning self when it's also like, well, what's this other person doing too? Like it's a lot of like different things like you're saying with communication as well. And when you were talking about um the part where it's like I'm laying there and I'm moaning and I'm having sex with my partner and I'm moaning and so they think I like this so then they keep doing it when really I'm having like a cringe-worthy like moment inside. I'm just kind of like, oh goodness, this is like one of the things that we do. We self-sabotage our pleasure for partners because and that could be part of like Emily Nagoski talks about human giver syndrome in her book with her twin sister. And it's like, if you care so much about the needs of others, like you're going to do whatever it takes to the point of where like you are giving your whole self in all these different areas. And I truly, truly believe that like we do that with our sex lives. I feel like when we're human givers and we are essentially like faking orgasm, moaning when we don't mean it, right? Doing these things that like even we might like be a tease a little bit and be like touching our partners and like playing around with them when really we don't want to have sex. And then we do, and then we might be like, oh fuck, well I wasn't actually in the mood, but I guess I'll do it because I care about their pleasure. And so it's also like, how do we not self-sabotage ourselves in our pleasure? And how do we make sure that it doesn't come out like as a communication fuck? Because that was like so many wrapped up there. There's layers in it. And it's hard. And I think, like you're saying, it's just like, well, we have to undo some of these layers here to figure out, like, well, what do I like? What's pleasing to me? And then how can I communicate that to my partner? Or how can I slow this down a little bit? And even with love languages, too, it's kind of like, well, does my love language mean something else? And like, can I get pleasure from these other things with my partner? And is that a turn on for me? Versus maybe physical touch isn't as much. And that's totally valid. Like, again, like that could be an ace thing too that could tie in with this as well. Like, asexuality, no physical touch, like not really wanting maybe sex at all, like not longing for that. It's that true emotional connection. And so it's also like, well, then how does that tie in? And I think those are really, really important, like things that you're describing too, and then the attachment piece of it as well. And some people don't realize this or recognize it or know it, but when we have sex with somebody, our DNA literally like changes and our body chemistry changes because there's hormones like flying about, like they're going all over the place. And it's just so fascinating and interesting to like know that I think it's important to just kind of highlight like how much attachment plays into it in ways that we may not even recognize or realize. Um, so that's my little tangent there with like these like 25, 35 like year old folks. Like when it comes to sex and sexuality, a lot of time it is sexual exploration. And I do think that because of the lack of, you know, knowledge, or even for a person to be able to come and see someone and say like, I want to explore my sexuality, because I never had the opportunity to do that growing up. And be it maybe there's some cultural components, like I could be shunned from my family if I even tell them, or if I come out. And that's why like a lot of people don't come out either, because of those different cultural components too, where it's like I will literally be shunned, or no one will talk to me. I'll be cut off. For some folks, it's like I will experience homelessness. I will essentially experience emotional abuse, maybe even physical abuse, maybe even like financial abuse. Like if like parents, depending on the age, like if they have their kiddos like bank accounts and stuff, or family members or loved ones, right? Like there's so many things to think about with sexuality and safety. And I think that's another part of it too. Like 25 to 35 is a really great time that a lot of folks are exploring their sexuality, because maybe they weren't allowed to till like age 25. And maybe when their brain's fully developed at that time, it's like, oh, well, now that I think about this in my childhood, that makes sense here. Like, I need to go see somebody and talk to them about this and explore that. And it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to give myself that freedom. And it's also like, there's a lot of different layers to it as well, depending on what that sexual exploration is too. And I think it can be valuable. I honestly don't think, this is one of the things, like no one is 100% like heterosexual. Like, no, we have all got our crushes on certain people out there. Y'all are fucking lying. If you disagree with me, you can't tell me that everybody in the world out there, or everyone just fucking enjoys the missionary vanilla sex all day, every day, and has been satisfied every time, or hasn't had some sort of sexual fantasy that's different. I would be willing to bet money if we were able to like pull everyone on this planet Earth like that, that would not be the case. It would not be 100% at all. And if it was, probably fucking lying. So I think that that's so important. Um, what do you think gets in the way for, because we have this other question, right? Like, and this kind of ties into like barriers to pleasurable sex, but what gets in the way of pleasurable sex overall? Like, I know we talked about barriers, but also like, what are some other components? What are other elements that we might typically see, or just kind of know a little bit about, that maybe some people out there may not recognize or just know or understand because they're not in this work?
Yeah, and I think, like a lot of what we've talked about already definitely ties in, kind of generally, not it, I think a lot of what we see in our clients tends to be very just real things that happen in the general community. But, maybe one aspect that we haven't talked about is like internalized kind of beliefs and values, even. Um, and for me, like, I, in my own experiences, like, I think religion has played a big impact on just like, how I feel about any of that, what I'm supposed to know or do about any of those things. And that's something that also comes up within the clients I see and the friends that I have and just people that I know. So I think, in a lot of the things that we are taught and the things that either we're socialized or the conversations that we have early on, I think all of that, what starts out as like oh, you're not supposed to have sex right now. Having sex right now as a teen, as a young person, means you are bad. Therefore, having sex is bad. Therefore, I am bad. Therefore, shame, shame, shame. And so, that it's just you're nodding your head. You have so much to say about this, but it's just this huge thing that's come up for so many people, myself included, of just these internalized beliefs that make it just so hard to break the patterns that you already have, the you know the to overcome the worries associated with just the things that maybe you don't know or aren't educated about, or the worries and that come up while you're having sex. So yeah.
Mhm. I had to like bite my lip and my tongue to spin and like nod my head like a bobblehead over here because yes, yes, yes. And when you were saying that, Holly talked about like purity culture for sure in the chat and how Holly's parents didn't tell Holly anything about sex. And when you're talking about religion, totally, absolutely. It's such a big component and at least my personal experience, like grew up like Polish Catholic, like very traditional. And that's not me. If anyone like even scrolls through my Instagram, you probably would be like, what? But that's honestly some things where it's so true. It's like you wait to have sex until you're married, and then it's like, well, fucking why? And then what if you don't like how you and your partner are having sex together? Then you have to go to marriage counseling then, and then is there even premarital counseling before then that actually talks about sex that isn't through the Catholic Church? And if not, then it's like, well, then why aren't we even discussing this at all? And then we're gonna just like figure it out on our own and explore a little bit about like, well, what do we like in the bedroom and what don't we like in the bedroom? And I think with one of the things, it just for me, this is my reaction to like this whole purity culture and these different types of things when we think about like promise rings and like there would be girls in college and high school where they would have a promise ring where it's like we can break that when we have sex or like that's my virginity and this is me promising to you that like I'm only gonna have sex with you for the rest of my life. It just creeps me the fuck out. Like why do you want to promise this to one person and what does that say about the patriarchy again and putting these norms on women in cis het relationships or just any relationships? I mean, that's typically what I've heard and that's been my experience, right? Not saying there isn't any other types of relationships that maybe they have experienced that, but it's just pretty fucked up and it's so just like dirty and icky and gross. And it's like we use these different scare tactics to like embed that shame and that fear in people. And it's like at the end of the day, you know what? Like Holly, I know your parents told you nothing about sex. I bet you're having sex out there in the world. So are all these other people. And it's just like we need to break that the fuck down a little bit. And religion is such a big one too. Or even messages that we get growing up, like, oh, be ladylike or be a good girl or like just even daddy's little girl has creeped me the fuck out. Like what the hell does that mean? And what kind of we probably talk to our clients more about enmeshment, where it's just unhealthy boundaries and relationships and things are just not good in family systems, right? Like, what kind of enmeshed boundaries are there when we might be using some of this language here? Or even like when there might be unwanted touch too. Like that could be a totally huge part with like parents growing up and then maybe like re-passing down generationally like those actions and those types of things with like unwanted touch. Even if that's like, no mommy, no daddy, I don't want to hug, no parent, no whomever, caregiver, I don't want to hug, please don't touch me. And then they still do it anyway. That's still a violation of consent there. And so it's like when we think that adults, what they're saying and people that we arguably like parents, grandparents, whoever, who we think we can be able to trust as kiddos, right? Because they're a family, we can't always do that. And it's just really hard because when you're a kid, how do you know any different? And so it's like we need parents to also be able to have these conversations about sex, but also like consent, like respect a child's consent when even those small things come up too. And that's a lot of different things culturally as well as you were kind of saying like maybe that physical touch could come up in certain types of situations or scenarios where it's like well no I don't want to physically like have a hug with you or like maybe because I didn't see that this is what I thought the norm was growing up and how you give and receive love. But then it's also like you can give and receive love in other ways. It doesn't just have to be physical or sexual. And so it's like this is compounded and it's layered work. And religion is such a huge one too. And even in other world cultures, like it may be similar where like you like there's I forget which one I was reading on the other week, what specifically, so I'm just not going to name it, but where it's normal for in the culture for the man to have multiple wives, multiple sexual partners, polyamory, that kind of thing, and it's okay and it's cool. But for women, it's not okay and it's not cool, and you're expected to please your husband. And it's just like, well, what's that all about then, too? So then it's like, if you're grown up and this is your norm and this is what you see and this is culturally what's happened or what's been done for so many years, it's like, well, then how do I, stand up for myself? Like, do I even like this? Do I even want this for myself? Am I going to be, kicked out of the family if I don't do this? Am I going against some big, like, thing that, it's culturally acceptable and I'm challenging it and I'm not here for it. So it's like that identity piece of like internal struggle and battle too. It's like, do I do what's right for me? Do I do what my culture teaches me with this?
Right. And, I think that's such a hard part, like being in America. It's like this blending pot. I think as far as assimilation and figuring out, like, oh, am I, for me, am I Asian? Am I American? Well, I'm Asian American. And that looks like, for me, probably different from what other Asian American people feel like and see and what that looks like and is portrayed. So, I mean, yeah, I think the identity piece, as like, is religion a huge aspect of your culture? How does that translate to sexual encounters? How does that translate to internalized beliefs and internalized possible shame and guilt? And so, I mean, there's so many different things. And so I know we like started this topic, and it's just, the boundaries. I feel like there's endless boundaries, which is like a sad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But also that doesn't mean that they can't be broken down, that they can't be, analyzed and processed and worked through. So one thing that recently came up, I was reading about it this week, like there's a TikTok that went viral, and maybe you've seen it, and it's like this gal, I think she's from Florida or something. um, she had she had talked about just kind of a rant about how like you should have sex before on your first date, because I mean, if you don't, like, she gave an experience about how she waited like months and months and months. She finally had sex with this person. It was just really, really strange, like not compatible sex is how she described it. And so for her, that was like, okay, we're done. We're like, and that was end of relationship. So she, in her opinion, she was like, okay, this is why, some reasons why you should have sex on your first date. Granted that you want to and you're comfortable, kind of thing. So I guess this sparked like a whole bunch of debate and stuff like that of like, why you should, why you shouldn't. And I don't know, like I just think it's an interesting thing, because tying that in with religion, a lot of times it's the you don't have sex until you're married. If you do, that's a sin, that's bad, that's all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so and you had kind of mentioned it earlier too, like you do that, maybe you get married, maybe you go through the marriage counseling, maybe you go through all of that, and the sex is bad, maybe it's still bad, maybe you're not compatible, who knows. And so I mean, there's so many different ways about that. But that consent piece is, and the education and being comfortable in your skin with your body, being able to communicate, are all like just solid pieces of having that pleasurable sex. So kind of
Right.
circling around here.
Well, and it really makes me think about this, right? If you can't talk to, if you're engaged, right, and you can't talk to your soon to be spouse about sex, or there's something in your sex life that you're wanting but you're not having, do you think marriage is going to fix that? Like, do you think ultimately you should be getting married? Because I also see couples that are married and they've been married for 10, 20 years. There's resentment. One of them wanted kids, one of them didn't. one of them wants to open up the marriage and have a poly relationship, one of them doesn't. And then it's like, okay, well, if both partners aren't in agreements on this, then really, like, my job is not going to be helpful with you because I don't do discernment counseling. And that's one of the things where it's like, I can send you an outside referral source for this. But honestly, like, we're here to figure out like what is going to make your sex life better. So it's like, well, why are we jumping into marriage too at such young ages when maybe we don't even have our sexuality figured out? We don't have our sexuality figured out and we can't talk about sex with our spouse or our soon to be spouse. Like, why rush it? What is the fucking rush with it? And then it's also like so much pressure with it too. Like you get married, you have the kids, you have more kids, and then you like have a house, and then you have all these different things, and then there's all these different pressures from people within the family system that are telling you to do it this, that, and the other thing. And it's kind of like, well, hang on a second. Did anybody even ask me what I wanted? Or the couple or both partners as individual people. Did anybody even ask that? Or is that our norm here, like in our family system? Like we're pushing our values and what we want because maybe we want to be grandparents, right? Maybe we want them to have a house and like live close to us or whatever, right? But did we really ask those people what they wanted? So I think that's such a huge component of it too. And it's so hard because I don't know. I'm biased. I'm like, if you can't talk to your spouse about your sexuality or sex life or whatever, don't get married. Like, you're going to be getting married, and then we're going to have to do more work in therapy down the line versus like preventative work now prior to marriage. And so then, yeah, I've seen memes of that TikTok around because it's blown up a lot. And so I think it's such a great point, too. Like, you can have one night stands as long as they feel good, they're consensual, they're pleasurable, right? Like, and they can be one night stands and they can be lovely and they can be beautiful and whatever. And it's also like it brings up the question, do you really want to date somebody and then wait like the 90 days to see, because some of the research stuff with relationship attachment model of what I've seen and read is like you wait 90 days to have sex with somebody because then you're getting to know the person, you're trusting them, you can rely on them, you can depend on them, and then you can touch them. So it's kind of like the metaphor with it is like with a car. Like you wouldn't just test drive a car, ride that thing around. And in society, we typically do it backwards. So we jump into bed, we give it a test drive, and then we like it or not. And it's also like, well, do we want to have sex or do we want to have a really great relationship? And just because we have a great sex doesn't mean like that's going to be a sustainable relationship in the future. So it's also like, can we honor all these different things that are going to come up when it comes to our sex lives, maybe our marriage, our relationship, whatever it might be, and hold space for one another during this time. So it's like, yeah, if you want to date somebody and then like have it be like 90 days and then like see if you're enjoying that sexually, great. Like know that you can still get rejected, right? That's not just like a 90-day thing. That could even be 4 years into a relationship. That could be 2 months into a dating relationship. That could be like right after a one night stand where like those hormones in the brain make us feel stupid sometimes, and we're like, oh my god, I just found my next partner or whatever. And it's like, oh no, like we didn't talk about that, we talked about having sex here. So we gotta like talk about how sex and a relationship are different, so they go together, like for some people and for some folks, and for other people, no, they don't. So what does that relationship look like, and what does that sex life look like? So I think it's just interesting that TikTok for sure, because it brings up so many questions, and it brings up like this question of what is going to be right for me, what am I going to feel okay with, and what are like, it opens up that opportunity of like, what are my sexual values, and that's okay to explore it. And so it's kind of nice because it went viral, it's like, wow, people are actually like thinking about it or talking about it or exploring it a little bit, maybe in ways that they hadn't before.
Yeah, right. And I think, like I had mentioned that show Sex Education. And then like one of the comments or something, it is
Yeah.
definitely being talked about.
Mhm.
There's much more awareness, there's much more acceptance for all people to be able to have pleasurable sex and to explore their bodies and to be just educated about sex and all of those things. But,
Mhm.
I think ultimately, like with that TikTok, it comes down to what are you ready for? I mean, as far as like, yeah, if you want to have sex on the first date, if you want to have one night stands, like that's okay, and that should be okay. That shouldn't be like a bad thing. And if you aren't ready for that, that's okay too. And
Mhm.
being able to ask those questions for yourself, reflect on yourself, get to know yourself, and be okay with whatever the answer is. So,
Mhm.
and I mean, having these kinds of conversations with clients, with friends, with my partner, with you, like
Mhm.
I feel so helpful for the future, just because it's like, I feel like when I was in high school or when I was a kid and younger, like these things were not talked about. These things were not
Mhm.
normalized. And now like our society, where we have social media, we have all sorts of different things that are normalizing, that are doing the work, that are having these conversations. And to me, like feeling that difference just feels so good. So, and in doing the work ourselves, personally or with clients, like, I think that is part of the reason that, we're in this field kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Totally, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's like, I may be doing these lives and I may be like saying some similar things on some of them. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes our clients do that, right? Like we're in a therapy session, they're bringing up the same thing for the third week in a row. They may not know why, but it's important. So it's also like, well, I'm trying to communicate something. Or, maybe there's someone out there, like, even though I may be repetitive on some of this stuff or my content or whatever, one person is going to see that someday, and that may be the thing that's going to be super important for them to see or for them to hear. And so it's like we have to keep talking about it, we have to keep these conversations going, like you're saying, because then that's going to help change the progression of this and the future of it too. And I'm super hopeful because I think that social media has really done some positive things with it. I think that there's obviously a lot of rules on different platforms that I don't always agree with or like or whatever, and folks have to like get away with it. Like even me, I know I've been worried like my account might get deleted and stuff. And it's also like, well, if it does one day, then it's been up here for some times and whatever, and I'll come back and be more clever about what I say and how I say it. And that's what some folks have to do now. But it's also like, because how important this is, and because people are seeking this out and they want to learn, right? Like they're not always like growing up, like I watched porn, maybe I was hopping on and it was like, oh, well, let me learn about like what sex is, right? That's not the same thing. Nowadays, like teens and kiddos have the option of like, okay, do I want to like go to a porn website or whatever and look something up and try and learn and whatever? Or can I go to Facebook? Can I go to Instagram? Can I go to TikTok? Can I watch something funny? And so it's like there's some really great presence on social media from excellent educators, therapists, creators, business owners, like you name it, it's on here. And it seems like it's more good than it is harm. So it's like we gotta keep it going. We gotta keep this going, and we gotta have these conversations and these different posts where it allows folks to talk about it more and more and more. So I totally agree with what you're saying too. Any final thoughts with what we talked about for today? I know we went through a lot of different things, a lot
Yeah.
of different aspects of this.
And I think that, you talk about being repetitive and, having these kinds of conversations. But like you said, and, I 100% agree, these conversations need to be happening. And whether it's repetitive or not, like, you know, the reason why these things keep getting brought up is because we're constantly faced, with educating people all the time. And seeing miseducations, or the myths being kind of just laid out there, and so it's important. And if anything, I think the biggest takeaway is like, yeah, there's definitely boundaries. I think it's great that we're able to identify them and talk about them, and hopefully, anybody like coming across or listening in is able to be like, wow, that resonates with me, or you know, is able to be educated in some sense to be like, oh, So this is how it's supposed to be, and I think that's like the biggest purpose for, having these lives, or, having our social media and creating content and connecting with people, is just being able to have those conversations. So if anything, my biggest takeaway is just I'm extremely grateful.
I love that. Absolutely. Well, I want you to share your IG handle again for folks that may have joined us, listened in, or popped off, just so people can hear it at the beginning and at the end of this when they watch the replay too. So share your info again for everyone. Better go follow.
Yeah, feel free to connect with me. I'm pretty active on social media, on my Instagram, which is at New Leaf with me. Yeah, feel free to connect. I love meeting new people, creating that content. It's been a really fun journey for me. So I'd love if you could follow, get in, follow that journey with me. So
I love it. Do you have your signature sign off like Tamika says?
yeah, so part of
Yeah.
New Leaf is that's my company, New Leaf Counseling, and so my little sign off there is let's turn a new leaf together.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for joining me today. This was great. We may have to talk about a part two because I know you had a amazing post. I'm not going to give it away here. People go check it out about fetishization. I can't fucking say that word right now. It's been a long day. But I
Yeah,
feel like that could be a great topic for us to do another live in the future to delve into that a little bit more. If you're down for it, if you're not, that's cool. But
absolutely.
cool. People will have to stay tuned. Thank you for joining me again today. Thank you, everyone who watched this. If you want, come back to the replay. Send us, questions that you might have on it. Comment, like it, share it, save it, send it. You do you. And I hope y'all have a great day and stay shameless. Take care.